On the banks of one of the many swift rivers that roll down to the Tasman Sea through the Taranaki Plains, a young man in the blue undress uniform of a private soldier sat smoking his pipe. He was dripping with water, and a little pool had collected where he crouched in the fern, just a few feet from the bank of the stream. He had plainly just emerged from the river. His clothes were torn and he was capless. He was a man of about the middle size, spare of build, with sharp dark eyes and a bronzed complexion that told of past life under a tropic sun. Less than an hour previously he had left his comrades' camp, the tented lines of Her Majesty's 57th Regiment on the ferny flats of Manawatu, left unofficially and without his arms, strolling down towards the Tangahoé River as if for a bathe. A shut-eye sentry was on duty that morning, and the deserters' tent-mates too were sympathetically blind to his departure. The Tangahoé was the borderline between the country covered by the British Rifles and the unconquerable bush of the Maori rebels. Towards this Rubicon he made his way through the thick high fern, which soon concealed him from view. He attempted to ford the rapid muddy river, but it was up to his waist and almost swept him off his feet. Struggling ashore again, he took to the fern and travelled slowly and with great toil through it, keeping parallel with the course of the Tangahoé and heading downstream. He forced his way through the thick fern like a wild pig, to use his own simile. In this way he travelled something over a mile down the river, and then once more attempted to ford across, but it was too deep and swift. He crawled back up the bank again, and quite exhausted, with scratched hands and face and gaping half-buttonless clothes, he sat down to recover his breath and strength. His heart was thumping fearfully with his frantic exertions in the closely matted, entangling fern, and it was some minutes before he could command his trembling fingers to fill and light his pipe. After the soldier had sat and smoked a while, he rose, and making his way to a slight elevation on the banks where he could see over the top of the coarse Rarauhe fern, in some places 10 feet high, he looked around him. Directly across the river the bush began, the seemingly impenetrable forest solemn and dark, pregnant with danger and mystery. Turning in the other direction and facing the northwest, he could just discern in the distance the tops of a number of bell tents, the camp he had left behind him. And as he looked his last on the tents of his comrades and his tyrants, he heard the sweet notes of a bugle sounding a call. The midwinter air was very clear and still. It was the midday mess call. Come to the cookhouse door. No more cookhouse door now, that's a moral. Pork and potatoes for you, me boy. Or else a crack on the head with a tomahawk. Beyond the tents, another tent-shaped object took the soldier's eye. It was a lofty, snowy mountain glittering in the midday sun. It was far away in the northwest, so far that its base was hidden by the intervening bush, and only the white symmetrical upper part of the vast cone, a wedge of white culminating in as perfect an apex as any bell tent, was visible to the eye from this part of the Great Plains. It was the peak of Taranaki Mountain, which the white man calls Mount Egmont. Satisfying himself that there was no one in sight and that he was not followed, the soldier squatted down again and smoked his pipe meditatively. Suddenly he started up and listened intently. He heard something, and well, any noise meant danger. The sound was the trotting of a horse. Scrambling through the fern a little space back from the bank, he found that a narrow track wound through the tangle of tall brown bracken. Peering out from his shelter place, he saw, first, the glitter of the muzzle of a long rifle above the fern. Then, next moment, round a turn in the path, came a mounted man, a Maori. He was a tall, black-bearded fellow, wearing a European shirt and trousers, but bare as to feet. Each stirrup iron was thrust between the big toe and the next one, as was the universal Maori mode when riding barefooted. In his right hand he held an Enfield rifle, of the pattern used by the white troops in those days. The butt rested on his thigh, cavalryman fashion. Round his shoulders hung a leather cartouche box. There was another buckled round his waist, from which there hung also a revolver in its case. A How scout, evidently, venturing rather daringly close to the British camp. The white man hesitated only a moment, Then he boldly stepped out onto the track, directly in front of the startled Maori, who pulled his shaggy pony up sharp and instantly presented his gun at the white man. Seeing the next moment, however, that the white man was unarmed and alone, the Maori brought his rifle butt down on his leg again and stared with wonder at the forlorn-looking white soldier before him. "Here, you Pakeha, go back quick! Here atu! Here atu! Go way back to the soldiers! I shoot you, suppose you know, go! Hoki atu, shoot away! I won't go back! I'm running away from the soldiers! I want to go to the Maoris! Take me with you, you tangata kuare! You Pakeha fool, go back! Ti Maori kill you, my word! You look out, I don't care if they do, I tell you I want to live with the How House, Ipayana. All right, you come along, but you look out for my tribe, they kill you. I'm not frightened of your tribe. What your name? Pakeha Kimble Bent. The Maori attempted the pronunciation of the name, but the nearest he could get to it was Kimara Paneti. Too hard a name for the Maori. Taihoa, we give you more better name. Good Maori name, if my tribe don't kill you. Then the swarthy warrior dismounted and ordered the Pakeha to get into the saddle. He saw that his prisoner was dead tired. He turned the horse's head back towards the Maori country, and the strangely met pair struck down along the banks of the Tangahoé, the Maori striding in front. For about 3 miles the track wound down through the fern and flax parallel with the course of the river. Then the travellers came to a ford. They crossed safely, and clambering up the steep, muddy bank on the other side, they marched on towards the blue hills of the rebel country. The saturnine How House spoke little to the white man during that journey to the rebel camp. He stalked silently on in front, his rifle over his shoulder, turning quickly now and again to assure himself that the soldier was still following him. Presently they forded another stream, which Bent afterwards came to know as the Ingahape, and passed through a deserted settlement with its tumble-down dwellings of raupo reeds and its old potato gardens. A few minutes later they came in sight of their destination, the Ohangai PA, a high stockade of tree trunks sunk in the ground, some of the upper ends hewn into sharp points, others with round, knobby tops that suggested impaled human heads, surrounded a populous village of thatched huts. Just beyond it was the bush, stretching away as far as the eye could carry. It was a secluded, pretty scene, that village, with its neat enclosure, its rows of snug wares which could be seen through the gateway and the openings in the palisade, and its squares of maize and potato cultivations, sheltered by the friendly belt of dark green forest. Some little, nearly naked children were playing about on the open space in front of the palisades, when they suddenly beheld a white man riding along towards them, with a Maori walking by his stirrup. They stared wide-eyed and open-mouthed, and then rushed helter-skelter into the PA, calling out at the top of their voices, "He Pakeha! He Pakeha!" What a commotion that cry of Pakeha aroused in the slumbering PA! Men leapt from the flax wariki where they had been drowsing away the afternoon awaiting the opening of the steam ovens, and poured out of the narrow gateway armed with their guns and tomahawks. When they saw that the European was a harmless, unarmed individual, and that he was apparently the prisoner of one of their own people, the clamour died away, and they escorted the soldier and his captor into the PA. Bent quickly perceived that his companion was a man of some importance, from the peremptory orders he issued, and the alacrity with which they were obeyed. The scout was, in fact, the chief Tito Tahanatawa, a rangatira of high standing in the Ngati Ruanui tribe, and one of the How House's best fighting leaders. It was a wild scene that met the young soldier's gaze when he entered the stockade, and his heart sank before the savagely hostile gaze of a crowd of armed, half-stripped warriors, the black-bearded and shaggy-headed men of the bush, and their scarcely less savage-looking women. A strange ceremony began. In the centre of the village square or marae stood a rough-hewn pole or flagstaff about 15 feet high, on which flew 1 or 2 coloured flags. This was the sacred staff which the How prophet Tewa had commanded his followers to erect as a pole of worship in each of their villages. All the inhabitants of the village, men, women and children, formed up, and began to march round and round the new, with a priest in their midst, rushing frantically to and fro, and brandishing a Maori weapon as he yelled a ferocious-sounding chant. The people, too, lifted up their voices as they marched, and after listening a while, Bent found to his astonishment that part of what they were chanting in a singular wild cadence were these words in pidgin English: big river, big mountain, long mountain, bush, long bush, and so on, ending with a loudly chanted cry, "Raire, raire, how!" This meaningless gibberish formed part of the incantations solemnly taught to the How House by Teua, who professed to have the gift of tongues, of which the Pakeha's New Testament spoke. His disciples fondly believed that they were endowed by their prophet's angel with wonderful linguistic powers. The singular march suddenly ceased, at an order from the shawl-kilted Tohunga in the center, and then the people filed into the village meeting house, a large Raupo reed-built structure, taking Bent with them. He was motioned to a seat beside a Maori whose name he afterwards found was Hori Kere, and who could speak English fairly well. Sitting opposite Bent was a white-bearded old fighting man, a dour-faced savage, his brown face deeply scored with the marks of blue-black tattoo. His sole attire was a blanket. In his right hand, and partly concealed by the blanket, he held a tomahawk. His hand twitched now and then as if he were about to flash out the tomahawk and use it on the Pakeha, from whose face he never withdrew his fierce old eyes. He was the chief, Te Rangitutaki. A long talk began. Horikere interpreted. The Maoris asked Bent why he had come to them. Why had he run away from his own people? The deserter frankly told them that he was tired of being a soldier, that he had been ill-treated and imprisoned, and that he came to them for protection. Horikere said, "Pakeha, they want to know if you will ever leave the Maori and go back to the soldiers." The soldier replied, "No. Tell them I'll never run away from the How House. I want to live with them always. I don't ever want to see a white man again." When Kerai had interpreted the white man's reply, the old man with the tomahawk leaned over and said very earnestly, tapping the blade of the weapon with his left hand as he spoke, "Wakarongo mai! Listen, Pakeha, you see this patiti in my hand? Yes? If you had not at once replied that you would never return to the white soldiers, I would have killed you. I would have sunk this into your skull." After this brief speech, delivered with a fierceness of mien and glitter of eye that made the refugee tremble in spite of his efforts to appear calm, the old barbarian shook hands with him. Then Tito Te Hanatawa, the man who had brought the soldier to the pa, rose and said, "O my tribe, listen to me. Take good care of the Pakeha and harm him not, because our prophet has told us that if any white men come to us as this man has done and leave their own tribe for ours, we must not injure them, but must keep them with us and protect them." Tito's word assured Bent's safety, and the tone of the people changed to one of friendliness. Many of them shook hands with the lonely white man. The women cooked some pork and potatoes for him in an earth oven, and he was given to eat and received into the tribe. Henceforth he was as a Maori. Now began for the runaway an even harder life than that which he had endured in the army. He found that he was virtually a slave amongst the Maoris. This is part 1 of the adventures of Kimble Bent. Part 2 will follow, so make sure you like, share and subscribe to continue enjoying this story written by James Cowan and told from the first-hand account of the Pakeha Maori known by many names, one of which was Kimble Bent.